The American veterans of Igbo descent held a significant press conference in 2025 in collaboration with the Rising Suns and the Ambassador for Self-Defense, addressing critical issues affecting the Igbo community, both in Nigeria and the diaspora. The event was marked by impassioned speeches and strategic calls to action, particularly concerning the continued detention of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, leader of the Indigenous People of Biafra, IPOB.
To the American folks, that Nnamdi Kanu need to be released now. A lot of people have talked about him being unjustly incarcerated for nothing. He is not the problem of Nigeria. If anything, he's the solution to solve Nigerian problems. We're asking President Tinubu, just like we asked President Buhari, that got him in the first place, to release him. They have not done anything to anybody. On this note, we are reminding the world about what happened in January 2017, when inauguration of Donald Trump was celebrated in Port Harcourt, and the Nigerian government shut down and killed over 27 young youths of Igbo descent, IPOB young stars, for doing nothing but cheering up the president of their choice. This happened and nobody have been brought to account for that. We are asking that the government of the United States under Donald Trump, president, to look into that massacre, because it was democracy that was being celebrated, and those youths were happy, rejoicing that such a good thing happened, and the military went and killed them all like chickens. We continue to ask, what is it that you're holding Nnamdi Kanu for? And we believe, as a British citizen, the British government's hand is in it, because Nnamdi was discussing about the atrocities they're doing in Nigeria. They don't want any development in Nigeria. Everything that we are doing is what Nnamdi was preaching on, and everything he have said before have happened today, and it's still happening. The jihadis coming in to work for the British government and to be killing people, the Fulani herdsmen, the terrorists, and that's what they are, killing people, trying to displace indigenous people, trying to take their lands from them, land grabbing. We want the world to look into it, more especially the United States government. For one thing, if nothing is done, once these jihadis get hold of the southeast, the Christians that they're trying to exterminate, they will have hold of the sweet crew. And once that happens, the next thing will be to challenge the United States and even the Britain that is encouraging them to do their bad deeds.
At the 2025 press conference, the American veterans of Igbo descent addressed the worsening security situations in Nigeria, particularly in the southeast. They emphasized that in the absence of effective protection from the government, communities must be allowed and empowered to defend themselves against banditry and violent attacks. They call on local and international bodies to recognize self-defense as a human right in areas facing persistent violence.
The Director General of DSS, who in American context we might equate to the Director of Homeland Security, is a special government official in Nigeria who is privy to top secret intelligence, actually. For him to step forward and publicly told Nigerians, arm and defend yourselves, tells me a couple of things. One, Nigeria is either becoming a failed state or is already a failed state. Why? Because he said that they don't have enough government manpower to defend you. The military, the police, the DSS, that they don't have enough power to defend their citizens. What is the primary responsibility of any government, democratic government? To defend the lives and property of the people. So, for the director of DSS to say, we don't have what it takes to protect you Nigerians, it means that they are incapacitated. Self-defense is a natural phenomenon. If I were to pinch you now, you will blink unconsciously in defense of yourself. So self-defense is a natural phenomenon. But in the context of the DSS, honestly, I wasn't expecting that we shall come to that level at which the common people are required to arm themselves and defend themselves. But guess what? It has happened. In other words, what it means is you're on your own. If anything happens to you, you have yourself to blame. Now, because self-defense is a natural phenomenon, I have never read about any law, moral law, Christian law, civil law, natural law that is against self-defense. None whatsoever. But you know what? Where you have a good government, you take it for granted that you are protected. And so it's not even a question of whether I support it or not, or whether it is legal or not. And then for the government to say, defend yourself. Now, we are taking self-defense to a higher level. The level of you have to do everything possible to protect your life. Your life is the most precious gift God has given you. Very, very precious. God has given us a precious life to take care of, and we should guard it judiciously. But what is happening in Nigeria is that a group of bandits, terrorists, have taken it upon themselves to be massacring people at will. They carry arms all over the place, unchecked, unhindered. And they are decimating ethnic groups. In the name of herders, farmers, clash, rubbish. There is more to it. There is a hidden agenda.
AVID emphasized that Nigeria's constitution mandates the enforcement of judicial decisions. They referenced Section 287, which states that decisions from the Federal High Court and other courts must be enforced throughout Nigeria. Despite this, a Federal High Court ruling in October 2022 declared Kanu's arrest and detention illegal. Yet, the Nigerian government continued his detention, violating constitutional obligations. AVID argued that Kanu's case has evolved from a legal issue to a political one, placing the responsibilities for his release within the executive power of President Bola Tinubu. They urged the president to either restore Kanu's unlawfully revoked bail or discontinue his prosecution, emphasizing that the matter now falls under the president's discretion. AVID outlined several practical and constitutional steps that can be taken to secure the release of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu.
Well, there are several precedents. One, during apartheid, South Africa was suspended from the United Nations General Assembly until Nelson Mandela was released. And there's nothing that prevents petitions now to the United Nations General Assembly insisting that Nigeria be suspended until they release Nnamdi Kanu. That's one possibility. Another would be if you had the president issue an executive order says there are going to be no Nigerian visas to visit the U.S. until Nnamdi Kanu is released. That would impress upon all Nigerians the penalty they're paying because the government is being so lawless and tyrannical. There are other options like having an international arms embargo on Nigeria until Nnamdi Kanu is released, having very, very high tariffs on anything sold by Nigeria until Nnamdi Kanu is released. These are financial pressures. They've been utilized in other countries in the past. It's a matter of political will, not law.
AVID condemned the persistent violence against Christian communities, particularly in the Middle Belt and northern regions, where church leaders and worshippers have been targeted by armed groups. They noted that these attacks have intensified over the years, with little to no accountability from the authorities. AVID criticized the Nigerian government's disregard for judicial rulings, specifically the 2022 Federal High Court decision that declared Kanu's arrest and detention illegal. Despite this ruling, Kanu remains in custody, a situation AVID deems a violation of constitutional and human rights.
10 years that I was there, it was quite peaceful, at least in the southeast. Some of this was brewing already in the north, but in the southeast and the spaces where I was at with the Igbo, quite frankly, was fairly peaceful. And then, right around the time actually when they put Mazi Nnamdi Kanu under chains, things blew up. And more than that, I think when people in the villages and the boroughs of Southeast Nigeria look at this, they see, wow, if they can do that to somebody like Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, who is quite an individual, what could they do to me? What can they do to the individual citizens? It's just gone wrong. I'm telling you, and I've told the State Department here before, not from this current administration, but the previous one, that if we don't do something about this, that place is going to implode, and we're going to end up with a pile of people coming over who will immigrate just to get out of the place. That's what's going to happen. I think the other thing that lines up where the people, the situations that they're living in, many of them are Christians. We've said before, 90% plus are Christian. Those who are Christian are experiencing the same kind of attack. There's a group in Southeast Nigeria called Inner Society. And they're a data crunching kind of group. And they've also got a very nice legal angle where they triangulate on everything to make sure that what they print is real. And they printed a statistic where they said just recently that for a period of 9 years, there were more than 30,000, mostly Christians, either killed or extremely violated. And even since they printed that, another 9,000 have been added to the list. So you're talking about 40,000 people. When we had our 9/11 here in the US, it wasn't anywhere near 40,000. Look at the reaction we had. 40,000 people being killed or violated should draw an unbelievable personal explosion. I think one of the things that people need to do, citizens, whoever is a citizen in Nigeria listening to this broadcast, need to really think this way. I used to work for a guy who said, you know what, now that we've had all this discussion, that's all wonderful, but tomorrow morning when you wake up, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And the point is, you need to be able to answer that question. And for me, it comes down to three things. The first is you need to understand what's going on. What's going on in your village? Who are those strangers out in the bush? Who are they? What are they doing? You need to understand what's happening to you. You can't wait for somebody to tell you. Nobody's going to tell you. When DSS has already said, you know what? You better take care of yourself. Actually, I don't know if they really want to give us any good advice, but that's good advice. We need to take care of us. You need to get up and understand what's going on.
They called for immediate reforms to ensure accountability, transparency, and the protection of all citizens, regardless of their religion or political affiliation. The veterans urged both national and international bodies to exert pressure on the Nigerian government to address these injustices and restore faith in the country's legal and political institutions.
Powerful places, because they have a lot of control. I think you've heard quite a bit of wisdom about what the U.S. government can do. But for sure, the U.S. government needs to understand that if these three questions don't get answered, also by the United States, understand, have a plan, and take it personal, one day it will come to our shore. One day that place will just turn into a mess. And we need to make sure that it doesn't come to our shore.
AVID stated that Nigeria is failing in its most basic constitutional duties to protect the rights, lives and dignity of its citizens. They criticized the Nigerian government's poor response to the relentless attacks by bandits and terrorist groups, particularly those targeting Christian communities in the Middle Belt and North. Rural Igbo communities facing attacks from armed groups and even security personnel who are often under-equipped and vulnerable.
The question of human rights in Nigeria ought to go directly to a few people that I will mention. Yeah. They will talk about that. I'm talking about the person of a young lady called Leah Sharif, that was kidnapped by Boko Haram when she was 15 years old. 15 years old, she was kidnapped. Yeah. Until this day, she remains in the custody of the terrorists. Yes. She cried out to her government and they did nothing. No rescue, no help. And I want to surprise you. This young woman today is 25 years old. 25 years old, having children for terrorists, while the federal government of Nigeria ignores her cry for help and assistance. Yes. So you ask Leah Sharif about the fundamental human rights in Nigeria. Yes. And she will tell you the rest of the story. Another person that is worthy of note is another young lady by the name Deborah Samuel, a young college student in Shangari College of Education, Sokoto, Nigeria. This young woman was stoned to death in broad daylight while people stood and watched, while the government stood and watched. The army and the police, all the security apparatus, they stood and watched an innocent girl mowed down in broad daylight, and her body was set ablaze. Chances are this young woman was still alive while she was in flames. Things that you cannot bear as a father, as a brother. These things are happening in this country called Nigeria. And people expect us to be proud of the country. That's why we are here to talk to lawmakers over here, those that will listen, and I'm glad that they're paying attention. They're taking note.
What do you wish that the lawmakers would do first?
First of all, back during the days of the Trump administration, Nigeria was in the list of CPC country of particular concern. Yes. Then the new administration came in under Joe Biden, and they were taken off. Now, both houses of Congress, the House of Senate, the House of Rep, they're coming together to put Nigeria back as a CPC country that needs to be watched. Yep. Country that violates fundamental human rights. Yes. Country that may be sanctioned. Yep. Until they change their ways.
So, for the folks who are hearing this for the first time, what would you hope that they could do?
What I hope that they can do is to take the message to their respective constituents, to talk to their lawmakers, their reps, their senators, their House of Representatives. Tell them what's going on. Yeah. Tell them what's happening to other people on the other side. So maybe at least they can lend some voice when they're in session here at Congress. That's why we come here. Yes. This country holds the record for beacon of democracy in the world. That's why we're here.
That's why we're here.
That's why we're here.
Yeah.
It's simple. Yeah. One more thing, and the legendary of human rights violation, ought to be referred to a man in the person of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu. Mazi Nnamdi Kanu's continuous incarceration is the primary reason why we're here. We are here to call for his immediate and unconditional release, as already decided by United Nations back in 2022. For people that do not know Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, today he's being referred to as a secessionist. He wants to divide Nigeria. But I want to let you know one thing, how this young man started this whole thing. He did not start this whole thing by calling for Biafra or calling to be separated from the nation. He started in the year of 2012 and 2013 in London, on the streets of London, calling for one Nigeria, for unity, for the government to pay attention to the suffering of the people. The children are suffering. There's no job, unemployment everywhere. Our young people has taken up to criminality. So Mazi Nnamdi Kanu saw this and he began to preach, to talk about it. He wasn't calling about secession. He wasn't calling for Biafra. He was just a devoted citizen of the country. Well, seeing that felt a deaf ear, So he began to call for a referendum. What is a referendum? An opportunity for men and women, citizens of a particular country, to come together lawfully and decide their self-determination. Decide who to govern them, to elect government over them. It's called government by the consent of the governed. There's nothing wrong with that. And for that, this young man was arrested in 2015 and put in prison. And 2 years down the road, he was granted bail and was allowed to go home. While he was enjoying his bail, preparing to come to court, consistent with the bail conditions, he was invaded by the same government that granted him bail. A combined forces of the military, the Air Force, Navy, all of them invaded his home on a planned assassination attempt. They called it the legendary Python dance. Python should be dancing in the forest, not in a village where there were women, children, and elderlies. That's where the Nigerian military came to operate their Python dance. But at the end of the day, when the Python has finished dancing, scores of human beings were left dead. Properties were destroyed. Where's the justice? Where's the government? Where's the right of the people to be protected? And miraculously, Mazi Nnamdi Kanu escaped that very assassination attempt. And in 2021, June of 2021, they tracked him down and kidnapped him while he was on official duty in Kenya. As far as we are concerned, there is no democracy in Nigeria.
Beyond the immediate concern of Kanu's release, AVID called for a return to Nigeria's 1960 and 1963 regional autonomy framework. They argued that this restructuring would address long-standing socio-political and security challenges, promoting equitable governance and national stability.
Is that it's the subject of fear. See, when you don't make a plan, when you don't understand what's going on, and you don't take it personal, all of that gets replaced by fear. See, what happens when fear takes over, all the bad operators around you become temporarily successful. And that's evidenced largely by the growth of IDP camps in the country. You know, the internally displaced person camps are now over 1 million. In fact, there's an organization, they publish a thing called an IDP Atlas. And in the Atlas, they quote that 1.34 million people are now in camp.
AVID emphasized that Kanu's prolonged incarceration has inflicted deep trauma on his family, particularly his younger brother, Prince Emmanuel Kanu. AVID also highlighted the broader impact on Kanu's supporters and the Igbo community at large. They argued that the continued detention of Kanu has led to increased unrest and insecurity in the southeast region, as his followers feel marginalized and oppressed.
He has been incarcerated. He has not seen his family. Remember, once you are incarcerated, you can only see the light of the day, only 1 hour out
He's
of
in
the
solitary confinement.
Solitary confinement.
Which usually drives people insane within a matter of months.
Exactly. That's a mental torture.
And yet he
has put up with it for almost 4 years now.
Wow.
And still remains unshakable.
Yep.
Why? Because he is convinced of what he's doing.
Yeah.
That is right.
Resolute in his purpose.
Exactly.
A raison d'etre, a higher purpose. He is indestructible.
Absolutely.
Until his purpose is served.
You know why? Because whether you believe it or not, there is some divine inspiration that is at work in him.
Yeah.
If you are an ambassador of truth, it doesn't matter whether you are a Christian, it doesn't matter whether you are a Muslim, it doesn't matter whether you are an atheist. If you are an ambassador of truth, God is with you. Family is feeling the heat.
Yeah.
But you know what? They are consoled because their son, their father, their brother is fighting for a just cause. It has taken people years to realize what he's doing. Those of us, my area, like I said, is in social justice. So I was able to see and understand what he was doing as far back as 2017. And since then, I have committed to the cause that he has been leading, because I know that it is the right course. So right now, people are realizing what this man has been saying and the type of person this man is. And that is a consolation to his family that is fighting for a just cause, which everybody now is realizing. And it's also a consolation to our people that he was able to withstand all the torture, all the criminal harassment, and still remain the same.
In conclusion, the American veterans of Igbo descent declared that the continued detention of Nnamdi Kanu is an unjust and unconstitutional act that reflects a deeper failure in Nigeria's justice system. They warned that the government's disregard for court rulings, its inability to protect lives and property, especially in Christian and minority communities, and the suffering inflicted on Kanu's family and followers are alarming signs of a nation in crisis. They called on President Bola Tinubu to use his executive powers to release Kanu as a necessary step towards justice, national healing, and the restoration of trust in democratic institutions.